Yeah, I was going to say that, I think that's a big problem, resentments and recovery as far as relationships are concerned. And there's a lot of people that really don't want to give it time. Like they're very impatient and it's part of their makeup. And then they're told, you shouldn't be in a relationship. You should learn to develop yourself as a person, learn about your own strengths and your own abilities. And they don't do that. They latch on to somebody else who's also
It makes
going
perfect
through.
sense, though.
It makes
Yeah,
my
well,
sponsor still doesn't think I'm ready for a relationship.
it really, it becomes a codependent relationship, and it's really like, and eventually those two people that are looking to each other for an answer actually start resenting one another.
And you know why? Because
Absolutely.
they have expectations.
That's what
They
it's
have
really about.
expectations. They do.
Right, and that's what resentment is really about. It's about having maybe unrealistic expectations. And I think we
Or
all,
you could have that justifiable anger too, though. Like, what if someone cheats on you? Right? Nobody expects that to happen. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
I don't think you could expect that. It's one of those blindsiders that come
No,
out of
but
nowhere.
you
It's
can.
like, oh,
You expect them to be faithful.
yeah, I mean that's true. But that it's still that justifiable anger. All right. So what I was told was that anytime I'm angry about something, I'm wrong. Can you get with that, Lisa? Do you understand? Like,
That's
I
because
had
it's the
trouble
way
with
I
that.
perceive it and the way I act towards it. And
Well, I was
because
told that I'm wrong. I'm wrong because I'm the one that'll get high or drunk over it. Even if
Right.
somebody rams into my brand new car in traffic, no fault of my own.
Right.
And I'm going to be very upset for a
Of
couple
course.
days because I have no car or whatever.
Right.
I'm still wrong for being angry because I'm the one that will self-destruct. Justifiable anger.
I think actually Indian Bob was talking about justifiable anger the other night, and I looked it up and I posted it on his in the comments, but I can't find it.
You know what I've always heard resentments were, and it's a really good analogy, is that it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person would die because it's really only having an effect on you.
Right. Down at the center where I went through, one of the guys that taught classes there, a very popular guy, a doctor, as a matter of fact, he always said, you're calling the piccolo player a MFer, right? If that makes sense. The piccolo player is nobody, right? But when you're in traffic and you're driving and you're at work and then you try to go home and somebody cuts you off, somebody gives you the finger or whatever, and then you show up in this complete foul mood, it's because you're calling the piccolo player an MFer. All those people that didn't matter and are going to have no outcome on the end of your life. By the time you get home, you take it out on your significant other. And in Blake's case, it's better half.
We tend that's so funny. We tend to hold on to these resentments too, and as we hold on to them, they grow and grow and grow because in our minds we start letting this become something much bigger. We make a mountain out of a molehill with our resentments too. So it always gets worse over time. So that's why it's important to just let it go right at the time.
Yeah, and that's what a 10th step for is, right?
Exactly.
I mean, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. Remember, I was talking a minute ago about going to bed at night, not being able to sleep because of something you said or did that day or did a week ago or whatever, and you haven't dealt with it head on. You don't have to do that anymore once you go learn how to do a 10th step because you can promptly admit it, you can correct all that, and you can go to sleep without it.
Yeah, but I think before you go through that process, you have to ask yourself the question why. Why are you resentful, and why are you upset? Why do you feel hurt? What impact is it having on you? I think, kind of knowing why helps you towards the process of letting go. So until you really think about why am I angry? What is this about? Is this about the other person? Is this really about me?
It's always about us.
Well, it is about us. It is about us. But you know what? A lot of times we want to kind of find a very soft target. We find the person who's vulnerable and we attack them for what we're feeling inside. It's really a projection.
Especially somebody that you care about or that cares about you a lot that will put up with it. That's who you bring your problems to, right? A loved one or something, you bring them your issues. And
absolutely.
Irving was just asking, what is it? Why are we resentful? My understanding is this. So we go back to the three instincts: social, security, and sexual instinct. And your ambitions for those areas. Everybody wants to grow socially. Everybody wants to feel secure financially or in their home or in their life. And everybody has a God-given sexual instinct, right? And a perfect example of a hardcore resentment is finding out that your significant other is cheating on you or getting dumped, because it affects all three instincts. Your social, everybody knows you got dumped. Your security, I can't keep a woman. And your sexual, right? It affects all three of those ambitions across the board. And you got to think about it. Getting cut off in traffic is one thing, but getting dumped or cheated on by someone, that can last weeks, right? Over processing in your head if you don't do something about it. So that's why, in my understanding, that's why we get resentful, is because it has affected our instincts and our ambitions for those areas.
That makes perfect sense. So is there ever a time where resentment is healthy? Like, can you have a healthy resentment?
I don't think so.
Is there a justified resentment? Is there ever a justifiable resentment?
Well, there's justifiable anger, right? Obviously people have had family members killed in car wreck for no reason. You didn't do anything wrong. Family members killed in a car wreck. They didn't do anything wrong. Maybe the other person didn't do anything. It's just a freak accident, whatever. So you're going to be angry. But it says for alcohol, so that is justifiable anger. But for alcoholics and addicts, the book actually says this: justifiable anger is a dubious luxury of normal men. And dubious means uncertain. So it's an uncertain luxury for us. It's uncertain what we will do when we hang on to resentment and remain angry for long periods of time.
Gotcha.
Then it goes back and says it's the number one offender. So for alcoholics and addicts, no, there's,
I think you
at
raised,
least that's the way I take it.
I think you
There's
raised
no
an
good way to be angry.
I think you raised an interesting point. I mean, you have the right to feel any feeling that you want to feel.
Oh yeah, you don't ignore it.
I mean, you don't have to suppress your feelings,
But you
but
don't
the question
have to
is,
sit there either.
right. And the question is, like, do you act upon your feelings? Do you act upon your anger? You have a right to feel angry. But what happens when the anger consumes you to the point where you're holding on so tight that you're not willing to let go of that other person or that other place or that other thing, and you become very, very possessive and very, very judgmental? It really impacts you more than the other person.
It really does.
And that would be absolutely. That would be a deep-seated resentment right there. One that you refuse to let go of, or you can't,
So I think it's fair to say that, people have been abused sexually, physically, emotionally. And of course it's hard to let go of resentments. But the question is, do you forgive? Do you forget? I mean, that's something for each person to decide. Now, some people, they may forgive, but they're not going to forget. They'll forgive in the sense that they recognize that that person has had such great power over them for so many years, and now they've got to let go of that person in order to regain their own strength. But that doesn't mean you have to forget what happened.
I had a hard time with something that did happen to me when I was really young, and I had it was like, one of those wells. And even when I was still drinking and doing drugs, I was concerned about, have I forgiven this person, or have I shoved it under the rug and it's going to come back and bite me in the rear end? I mean, even because I really was wondering why it was not bothering me. Why is this not bothering me, even though it was a really long time ago? And, through therapy, it was bothering me. That was one of my deep-seated resentments that I didn't even realize I had. It was back here, and it was my steps that I did, which were extremely important, and I didn't realize that they said it was important. I just okay, I'll just do them. But and it was all back here, and it took me guidance and listening and believing, that other people knew much better than I, and and I mean, I think about it still, but it doesn't. You know what? I'm sober now, and I can let it go.
What do you think the number one resentment is?
Anger.
No, I mean, the number one people are resentful towards.
I'm going to go with relationships.
I am too. No matter what, parents.
I guess I mean more
kids.
specifically.
I agree, relationships, but again, are we talking about a work relationship? Are we talking about an intimate relationship? Are we talking about family of origin?
One would be the intimate, right?
Maybe that's why I don't have one.
I mean, nobody can hurt you worse than the person closest to you, right?
Well, what about family? What about family? Family of origin and the messages that we get when we're younger, which we carry throughout our lives, and reenacting those very, very same relationships that we've had with our caregivers. And if they were good relationships, we carry those good feelings and those good thoughts and belief systems. And on the other hand, if we grew up in a family that was kind of dysfunctional, we've gotten very, very negative messages, which we carry forth into our future relationships, sense of self, in basically all the things we do. So then it requires, a little bit of insight to like really understand, like, am I really acting as an adult or am I acting as my inner child? Okay, so you take responsibility for your actions, but when you stop blaming yourself for everything, what happens? What happens to your sense of self?
It goes up.
I guess
you
I
stop
never
blaming
realized because
yourself?
I was always drunk.
When you stop blaming yourself, or you start blaming yourself?
When you start blaming yourself
Oh.
for everything, like, because you can blame other people for everything that's happened in your life, or you can blame yourself and you can feel like, that you have like the power to, over everything. And you can really end up putting yourself down and not feeling good about yourself. And so I think it works both ways. I think you have to show compassion towards others. You also need to show compassion towards yourself. You need to learn to love yourself. And I'm just the coming to grips with your addiction and why you did what you did is one thing, and making amends. But beating yourself or flagellating yourself, as some people often do, I don't think that's a constructive way of getting better.
And just so James knows, he didn't say flatulation.
I did.
Just so you know.
I thought he said that
No,
too.
I did. Did I say that?
You
No.
said, no, you did.
Flagellating.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure
No, you
James
said it.
heard that
Okay, yeah, there
correctly.
is a close resemblance.
You know what? Y'all are hitting all over it, though. I got to tell you.
But James,
did you have something, Blake?
Before you go, real quick, we have a caller on the phone. Caller, are you there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here.
How's it going, buddy? Who do we got on the phone?
This is Joe Turner from Kentucky.
Hey,
Hi,
Joe.
Joe.
Hi, Joe.
What's up, bud?
What's going on, guys?
We're talking about resentments. What do you think?
It's something that everybody has to deal with, and if you get through the steps, it helps you work through the majority of them. But the one that I deal with the most is the self-resentment. While I was locked up, my father passed, and I got the news, behind the plate glass.
Okay. So you blame
that's
yourself that you
one-
weren't there.
Right.
Okay.
My dad was my world. I strive to be like him. He was a great man, and not to be there. Even my stepmother always told me he was asking for me. Right before he passed, and it's just I talked to my sponsor, and I've worked the steps many times now, and it's just one that's hard for me to get past.
Here's what I have a question for you, though, Joe. This is Sweezy, by the way. So can you share because there's probably somebody listening right now that has gone through something similar, even if they weren't behind the glass, maybe you're high whenever you get that information or whatever. How did you deal with it, or are you still dealing with it right now?
It's something that comes up at least once or twice a week. I get to thinking about my dad real hard, and that resentment builds up to against myself. But how I have to deal with it, as I stay plugged into the group, I stay plugged into my network, and of course I talk to my sponsor about it. But the first and foremost is I have to pray. Me and God got to have that one-on-one connection, and God, I know you put me through everything you put me through so I could be who I am today, and please help me understand your will here, and let me see what you're trying to guide me through, and then I have to meditate and wait on His answer.
So, Joe, let me ask you a question, if I may. So, you're feeling guilty about the fact that you weren't there for your father, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a good relationship with him?
It's in my early years, preteen, yes, me and my father were real close, and then my mother and father divorced, and I went through the whole, teenage years, not seeing my father. Then when my son was born and I became a father, that's when me and my dad reconnected, and we had a great relationship, especially watching, him letting him see his grandson, grow and whatnot. And then I went in hardcore active addiction and got locked up for some time. And we fell away, and that hurt me just in general, not to even get to see my dad. My dad wouldn't even come see me while I was in jail, in prison.
Hmm. But it sounds like
And
you have
then-
some strong feelings about your father, and maybe you have some positive feelings about your father as well. And is that true?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
So why don't you think about how you can honor your father's legacy rather than blaming yourself?
Well, and that's what I strive. I mean, I would almost say every day is I try to become. If I can become half the man he was, then I've honored him. But I don't know. It's something that I can't get past today, and it's working the steps and talking. Like I said, with my sponsors, what keeps me from digging that hole deeper.
Mhm.
If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do the same thing. My mom, I really wish, and my sister, I wish my mom and my sister and my dad could see where I'm at right now, or, and a lot of people say, well, they do, and okay, they probably do, but I mean, and I start to feel guilty. Why couldn't I do this before? If she could just see me now, because I wonder what she thought about when she died. I was in treatment down here back in 1999. I got a call that she had passed away, and I lost it, and I wasn't there. She was really sick, but I couldn't go take care of her. They wouldn't let me. I was doing a case plan to keep my son, and I wasn't allowed to go back to St. Petersburg. So I feel you. I do, and I do struggle with it. I wish she was still here, and I could talk to her. I could talk to her and she could see a different daughter than she did.
And you hit the nail on the head right there. I'd give anything for my father to see who I've become and what I've become.
Yeah.
But I have to look towards my faith and know that he's watching over me. But it's almost, and it's something my sponsors helped me realize, that it's almost that validation we get from our parents.
Right.
And I seek that.
I can't speak from a place of it. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Go
Lisa.
for it.
No, I know. I've always. I remember when I went back to school, when I went back to college, and for the first. Well, I never went, but when I went back to college,
Clown college, by the way.
Oh yeah, they weren't allowed. They weren't. See, they missed so much. I got straight A's. I really am smart, by the way. I got straight A's, and I went, Daddy.
I know that.
I was like 30-something years old, and I'm like, I went to my dad, I still called him Daddy, and I'm like, Daddy, look at my report card, like I did when I was little. I still did, I swear, but I needed that. I was like, Daddy,
So you got an A in nose honking.
Yeah, I was the best. No, I was actually, how about
in face painting.
Yeah. No, well, not face painting, but but I was a reading tutor in college. I had my own little desk and everything. Oh, yeah.
Lisa,
I was coached through how to deal with that with a sponsee before, because I'm not going to pretend I've had to deal with what Joe went through or with what Lisa went through, but I had to help a sponsee get through it. So I had to turn around and call somebody, and what they had us do was he wrote a letter to his father. Mm-hmm. He wrote it out elaborately. Then he walked out to this labyrinth that we have. I hope I'm saying that right. Labyrinth. Yeah, that we have down here. And he walked around the circle and he burned the letter. Yeah. And then he vowed to his amends to his father was to never repeat that behavior again. And for almost 4 years now, he's held up that amends, and he seems to deal with it better. That's just that's what we were told to do.
And
that's how you make an amends to someone, right? You don't repeat the behavior.
You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
You'd be a better person.
Yeah.
Well, it's and my sponsors, he's recommended that, because he had to do that. He's actually went through the same thing that I'm going through right now. And he was able to go to to his father's grave and write that letter, and he sent it up in a balloon as he was sending it to his father. And I think this is part of the reason why I have a hard time getting through it is I don't even know where my father's at. When I was locked up, he was cremated, and none of my brothers or sisters even know where his ashes are, who has them.
Oh.
And
when I did it with my sponsee, he did not go to a gravesite though. He was living in a homeless shelter at the time, and the only option was to walk out behind that homeless shelter where they have that labyrinth, with the gravel. And somebody has to be there to observe because we're lighting a fire. but it was just a piece of paper. So my sponsee actually did not go to the actual site. He just did it right there at the homeless shelter.
I don't
And it
know where
seems
my
to have
mom
helped.
is either, Joe.
Sometimes it's not about going to any place. It's just about being and experiencing.
Right. I mean, wherever the ashes or the body or whatever that's all it is just their physical body. But, you have to hope that their spirit or their soul is with you at all times, or is surrounding you, or is up in heaven. I mean, whatever you'd like to believe.
And be a better person.
And be a better, and right. And so James said, the opposite of a resentment, or I guess making an amends is not repeating behaviors. But I think that's half of it. The other half is improving on behaviors, because I could easily not repeat a behavior and do something just as bad towards you. So it's improving and being a better person, just as Irving said.
Right. Definitely the improvement. But like, if, one of my resentments against myself was with my grandmother, where I manipulated her out of money. You know what I mean? So she passed not too long ago, as some of y'all know. I did get a chance to make my amends. And my amends is I don't manipulate people out of money. I don't do it anymore now. I'm improving in many other areas, but that's the way I was told. You know what I mean? It's like, don't manipulate people out of money anymore. Uphold you, because your grandmother said, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't do that anymore.
Absolutely.
So that's how I uphold my amends.
The other thing is, going back to earlier, this conversation about expectations. We're not perfect beings. We have a higher power that understands more than we do.
Speak for yourself.
Okay. Well, whatever your higher power is.
Herman, where's the button?
Talking about the
Hit the button.
perfection. Which one? Oh, but he's always right.
It's too late now. The moment's passed.
Herman
Thank you,
asleep.
Herman. Yeah. I just woke Herman up. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I lost my train
No,
of
you
thought.
said that you regular human beings aren't all perfect, and that most of us have a higher power.
We're going to feel feelings. We're going to feel resentful. We're going to feel angry. Again, it's what do we do with that? How do we
Right.
channel that? How do we make ourselves a better person? How do we reinvent ourselves? And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to go back in time and say, I'm sorry. And we might do it through a piece of paper, and we might do it through a letter. But I think a very potent way for a lot of people to do it is to actually just be kind to other people and helpful to other people, and improve, as you said, improve upon yourself. I think it's a matter of timing, because there are people that get out of recovery, out of rehab, rather, and they're not ready to kind of integrate themselves back into society.
Absolutely. Because look, when you're in rehab, how long is it? The average stay? What do you think, Blake? 45 days?
Yeah.
Average stay, 45 days?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's enough time to cause a psychological change in your brain, enough behavioral change, and enough change of your thinking process. So, yeah, you might want to be careful at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and maybe some people just go out a little too soon and they want to test the waters, especially like earlier you were referring to getting into relationships the first year, and how that might not be a good idea. But, people test the waters. They think like, well, okay, I'm out of rehab now, and let me try this, and let me see if I can get into a relationship, and let me see if I can have maybe one drink. Maybe one drink will work, and I don't need to go to that second drink. And maybe for some people they are able to do that. I don't know. Maybe I'm not an expert in the 12 steps, but maybe the 12 steps have been kind of convoluted to this idea that, it's like, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, rather, and people are not focusing on the things you can be doing and you should be doing, and the kind of the proactive stance that one can take, and as the speaker earlier was talking about, kind of living a life of joy, of purpose, of meaning, and rather than just sitting around wallowing in your own self-pity, kind of, going to the gym, being involved with people.
Getting out there.
Right, getting out there and connecting with people. And even if you haven't experienced that before, though, as you suggested, because it may not be rehabilitation, it may be habilitation,
right,
where you're actually going to a new phase, a new narrative that you're creating. It can be awfully scary. I've noticed in my practice, when I'm dealing with people that are either in addiction or people in recovery, the two things come up. anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And maybe it's been squashed through alcohol or drugs for a while. You know,
Sure.
it was there. It was there. You know, it was dumped in the garbage pail for a while.
Right.
You know, and then and you know, or you know, I don't want to use that word, that SHI blank. But you know, but what happens is, you know, you keep dumping it, stuffing it. Eventually, it's got to come out.